Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 25th episode of Keto Geek. We are so happy that you guys have joined us throughout this entire journey. And right now in our studio, I have Corey, who handles our production and everything. You just don't do production only, right?
No, I don't do just production, but I wear many hats.
Yeah, he's like the guru of everything, but his main focus is mostly with the product side of the world as far as Keto Geek is concerned. And Corey, by the way, you see that donut right in front of you? Avoid it at all cost. It's high in carbs. It's high in sugar. Bad things could potentially happen if you do anything with it.
You mean that donut that has that nice crispy glaze and the sprinkles? Oh.
Yes, just let me give this introduction real quick. And let's get on with the show. Let's thank everybody. We don't want this to go south.
It smells good.
Please don't do anything. Do not. Anyway, guys and gals, our ghee is finally on Amazon, and you can go ahead and purchase it over there. And then, of course, our energy pods within a week or so are going to be on Amazon as well. And they're going to be fantastic. We're just waiting for the approval to be done by the guys over there. We filled in everything. Everything's looking great. So please go ahead and check it out. If you buy it, please leave us a review. Also, this episode, this podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes as well. We don't have a lot of love. Corey, what are you doing?
Nothing.
Don't touch
it. I can't help it. I just can't.
Oh, did you, dude?
It's good.
Why?
Leave me alone.
Why?
Just leave me alone.
Guys, I think I have a very bad feeling about this. If anything happens,
nothing will happen. I'm not even gonna get out of ketosis, dude.
Okay.
That was under 20 carbs.
Okay. Welcome to the Keto Geek Podcast. Let's do this.
Health, nutrition, fitness.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, what was that?
Oh shit. He's here.
Who's here?
The Great One. He's here.
The Great One's actually here?
Yes, you ate way too many donuts, and now he's here. You need to repent. Now!
Father, forgive me, Father, for I've eaten too many carbs. May you have mercy on my soul.
Thank you. Wow, I'm glad that is over. So who exactly is Dr. Ted Naiman, or the Great One as we call him? By the way, we call him the Great One mostly because of the amount of respect that we have for him as a human being. He has helped countless people, and above all, he has a great sense of humor. If you go to any of his social media accounts, all the way from Facebook, Twitter to Instagram, you're going to find a lot of funny stuff about food, health, and nutrition. It will get you laughing out loud like crazy. And so that's why we just think he has the solution to all the problems in the universe. That's why we call him the Great One. But his real introduction is that he is a board-certified family medicine physician. He has devoted his life to the study of diet and exercise and their relationship to health. And he's found that using these lifestyle interventions, he can help thousands of people become more healthy and feel good about themselves, combat some of the chronic conditions and diseases like diabetes and some autoimmune conditions. So he's a genuinely cool and nice guy. And so he also enjoys some side activities such as Krav Maga, Ultimate Frisbee, and many, many more things. So he's a well-rounded, cool guy. We had a wonderful conversation. We delve into some of the topics that are a bit controversial in the keto universe, especially when it comes to the role of fat in the diet. So I hope you guys have a good time listening to this podcast. let me bring to you the Great One. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the great, one and only Ted Naiman on board. And Ted Naiman, doctor, you are one of the reasons why Keto Geek is what it is. We love your work. We religiously follow your Twitter account. And every time you give a like on one of our posts, we feel like we're the happiest human beings on earth. How does that make you feel?
Wow, man, that is such a great intro. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's just an honor to be here.
Well, you are just such a vast pool of information, and you know so much about this entire low carb world, and I would love to share your story with everybody. So how did you get into this craze of low carb keto?
Oh, wow, man. Okay, so I've been treating patients with low carb diets for 20 years, and I'm really one of the original gangsters of low carb. I mean, it's pretty sad how old I am, but I go way back in low carb. And honestly, it was a patient who turned me on to it. I was a vegetarian. I trained at Loma Linda University, which is this huge vegetarian mecca. I had a vegetarian diet, and I felt like crap. I looked like crap. I was not particularly healthy. And that led me to believe that diet was basically pointless and worthless, and I didn't think it really mattered. And I really thought that just genetic destiny explained all the chronic disease I was seeing as a medical student and an intern. But then in internship, one of my patients who was diabetic came in one day and had radically improved his health, dropped 30 pounds, got off his meds, his blood sugar was normal. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, "What did you do?" And he just showed me a copy of the Atkins book and said, "Oh, I stopped eating carbs, and this is what happened." And I was so intrigued by the fact that diet could really make a difference like that I just spent years researching mostly macronutrients and health, and ended up with a low carb diet, both for myself and my patients. That's how I got where I'm at.
So what's with the whole situation in the medical field as far as low carb and keto and all of these sort of movements is concerned? Is there still obstruction, or are people finally starting to move in that direction?
I see a lot more movement in the past few years. I think the medical community has no choice but to pay attention to this. But we still see some major pushback. And honestly, the biggest driver of that is the fact that most people on a low carb / ketogenic diet will find their total cholesterol going up a few points. And everybody knows that's going to pretty much kill you instantly. So a lot of holdouts in the medical community, mostly around the cholesterol issue, in my opinion.
So keto low carb is still a relative minority, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Okay, despite the fact that we were technically supposed to be the most searched up term in 2017. So I think with people like yourself, I think you guys are going to be the future rock stars of the medical field, considering how smart and how knowledgeable all of you people are. And you make those crazy Ted Naiman memes. We call them God memes, by the way, at Keto Geek. So we follow them, we share them in our Instagram feed. Sometimes we post them as our stories. So we take full advantage of that information. So how do you create those? What kind of resources do you use? How do you chisel yourself?
Oh, wow. Well, okay, that is so undeserved. My little memes are so crappy, it's embarrassing. Like, I literally embarrass myself on a daily basis. I'm really just using, Photoshop or some Adobe products and some just wherever I can steal cheesy graphics off the interwebs and cobbling them together. It's extremely low budget. I don't have like a team of people helping me out with this. It's pretty lame. I mean, but I like the idea because I feel like if I can't explain a concept with one stupid graphic and a couple words, then I probably don't understand it well enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, yeah, we love them. I think you're just becoming a brand. Those memes are now becoming the Ted Naiman memes because they stand out from everything else, because everyone's making these memes and infographics that are so complicated, and yours comes along and it's so simple and easy. It's actually pretty refreshing to see those. So now you're a brand.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm really just trying to dumb it down as much as I absolutely possibly can, mostly for myself.
Okay. And so what about scientific research? Do you have any places you go to? Like a lot of our friends, everybody's on Sci-Hub these days. Is that where you go to? Or are there any books or researchers, some people you follow?
I honestly, I go to the primary literature as much as I can. So I'm just constantly searching PubMed and Google Scholar. And I've downloaded so many illegal papers off of Sci-Hub that I'm pretty sure I'll be in some sort of penitentiary by the time you air this podcast. I feel bad, but I do that all day long.
And your information is just so good, and so we do the same with your memes. Though we just take them and spread them like wildfire. So everybody's just taking information from here and putting it there. So that will be interesting how this will phase out, like this modern way of learning. So how do you think that's different from, like, for example, if a lot of knowledge acquired in med school isn't applicable, how do you think people are going to learn now?
Honestly, more and more, I feel like having formal education might just be getting in some people's way. And I see, people like, engineers like Marty Kendall and Ivor Cummins, doing their own research and coming up with, way better nutritional advice from first principles and just their own research than anything I see out of trained nutritionists. And I see people like, you've had all these people on your podcast, of course, but I see people like Dave Feldman, doing this research and coming up with stuff on his own that's so insightful. I feel like in the future, half of this is going to be crowdsourced, and people are going to look down at you if you're a quote doctor like myself. That's actually going to count against me probably in another couple of years.
But correct me if I'm wrong. You have engineering background somewhere in there. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like that was so valuable. Just this whole problem solving, your body is a black box sort of mindset, I think has come in really handy. So I love that approach. Engineers
are the best. You're talking to one yourself, but then again, I dropped out after like 1 or 2 semesters left because of family stuff. So I think more power to the engineers. I've recommend.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I agree.
So there's something that you pound on, which is how people get obese and the filling up of fat cells, which I found very fascinating. And I would love it if you could sort of give people the narrative on a normal person and step by step, now they're overweight.
Right. Okay. All right. I think if you zoom way, way out, like, if you go way up to the 50,000 foot level and just zoom out as far as you can, you take a human and you dump them in the wilderness with nothing but a spear, right? They're like naked and afraid and they've got a spear. What you're going to be eating is some animals that themselves are probably starving for energy and trying to get as much energy as they can from the environment and from nutrition. So you're finding animals, you're killing them, you're eating them in their entirety, and maybe you're getting some plant food, some tough, fibrous plant food with very little carbohydrate yield. Your wild plants that aren't going to kill you are few and far between, and the energy yield from these plants is horrible. So here you are starving to death, and you're massively protein constrained and fiber constrained. So you're just eating like tough little roots and tiny tubers and fruits and nuts and any animal you can catch. And you have probably enough protein and fiber, but you're massively energy constrained, either carbohydrate or fat. So you're basically starving to death, and you're just constantly looking for energy to add to your protein and fiber, right? You're looking for any kind of honey or any kind of carbs from plants, any kind of fat from animals, bone marrow, organ meat, whatever you can get, right? Now, if you come across some extra energy, carbs and fats, you're just going to eat the hell out of that stuff, right? Now, you take this same person and you dump them into the modern food supply where we've flooded all of our protein and fiber, which are kind of expensive, with refined, processed, empty calorie carbs and fats, basically sugar, flour, oil. We've dumped so much energy, just free energy, nutrient devoid, empty calorie energy into the food supply in the form of sugar and flour and oil that we've diluted out protein and nutrients. And what you're left with is a protein percent that went from anywhere from 20 to 35% for every hunter-gatherer group that's ever been researched, down to about 15% in the industrial era, and then down to about 12.5% in this country over the past couple decades. So now you're eating all this energy, carbs and fats, and your protein and nutrient intake is so low. And then you're eating carbs and fats together, which in the past was a seasonal nutrient indicator that you should store energy as fat, right? So if you eat your cells, your mitochondria can't really burn fat and glucose at the same time very well. There's this, whole competition between the oxidation of glucose versus fat in the mitochondria, the Randall cycle. So when you dump fats and carbs in together into anybody, you're going to just automatically store all the fat. And that's something we used to do in late summer and autumn when we had more carbs and more fats in our environment. We would store up all this fat for the winter time. And then during the winter, okay, now you're just eating starving animals again and basically no plant carbohydrates and not as much fat. And you're living off of stored body fat and you're getting thinner. So there's this cyclical thing going on where late summer, early autumn, you're getting more carbs and fats. You're storing fat for the winter. During the winter time, you're back down to leaner protein from starving animals, no carbs, and you're losing fat. And what's happened now is we finally have all the energy around us we could possibly want, carbs and fats, and it's there 24/7, 365, and we're eating them both together with all your fattening, carb and fat together foods like French fries and ice cream and potato chips and donuts. And the result is we're constantly storing fat, never burning it. We fill up our adipocytes, and there you go. Next thing you know, you're insulin resistant, you're diabetic. You never burn, you're just not burning fat as much as glucose, and it just kind of goes on forever.
Okay. So what exactly is insulin resistance? And some of the people have said we don't know the exact mechanisms of why it happens. So where do we even begin with this?
So I'm a mechanical engineer, and I can't help but think about the fact that you literally have no more place to put fat in your body. And that is, in my personal and professional opinion, the cause of insulin resistance. And really, almost everything you can research about insulin resistance backs that up.
So,
I mean,
go ahead.
You basically, whether you don't have very many fat cells to begin with, or you've maxed them all out and can't expand them anymore or grow new ones, when you run out of places to put fat, your insulin's going to be high all the time, and and that's insulin resistance.
So it could be induced by just an energy influx. Seems like that seems to be the case here. It's like if you consume way too much energy, now you're insulin resistant.
Absolutely right. It really is exceeding your ability to store energy. I think that's just the simplest way to put it.
That's fantastic, because when we talked with Dave Feldman, they said that the body has a way to bring you back to a homeostatic position, but this is one way you're kind of trying to override it, and your body's telling me, I'm going to give you sort of like a middle finger if you don't stop. So it seems like that's the case here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of what it is the cells don't want more energy, And they're giving the middle finger to your body, which is trying to shove more energy into them with insulin. And so it becomes your cells and your tissues versus your body, and nobody wants that extra energy.
So do the cells reject that energy? So what goes on at a molecular level when you are insulin resistant?
Basically, your cells are supposed to respond to insulin by allowing more glucose into them, and they just totally refuse to do it because at that point they're looking out for themselves. They already have too much energy, mostly fat energy inside the cells.
Okay. All right. And so one of the questions that I'm curious about is, are there people on Earth who don't fare well when they're exposed to a ketogenic or a low carb diet? Do exceptions exist, or is it just bad protocol?
Well, yeah, there's an exception to everything. And so there are people who have rare disorders where they can't metabolize certain amino acids, and they probably shouldn't eat a certain amount of protein. We see people with various forms of storage disorders where they probably shouldn't eat either unlimited amounts of protein or unlimited amounts of fat. There's always going to be some rare genetic defect out there where there's an exception. You know what I mean? Nothing's ever 100%.
Okay. So during your entire practice, now you don't have to answer this question, but were there any cases in your patients or people that you came across that stood out like sore thumbs or like a lighthouse in the dark that you think should be highlighted here, or would you like to explain?
Well, actually, first of all, I would have to say that most of my patients with genetic disorders actually do great on very low carb and ketogenic diets. I've had patients with glycogen storage disorders, for example, and the old school treatment for that was, you'd better just eat a constant steady stream of glucose 24/7. Just eat like a handful of Skittles every 30 seconds for the rest of your life, just because they had energy issues without doing that. But I have had these people adopt, very low carb and ketogenic diets and actually have huge improvements in health and function and lab work and anything you can measure. Even though that's kind of the opposite of what the textbooks say. I've had patients with lipodystrophy and inadequate leptin do awesome on very low carb ketogenic diets. So a lot of these genetic issues will actually improve with low carb and ketogenic diets. And to be perfectly honest with you, in 20 years of medical practice, I have never personally dealt with someone who had a genetic problem with various amino acids or protein to the point that they needed to eat a restricted diet. So I honestly don't have personal experience with someone for whom a low carb diet would be bad or dangerous. These are just things I've read in the medical literature.
Sounds good. And you have correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a very minimalist style towards treatment where there isn't a lot that is required. So what is your normal diet plan like for yourself? Like, I'm curious.
Okay, so basically my template is so simple, it's ridiculous. It's pretty much just properly raised animals and then maybe some low sugar fruit here and there. And by low sugar fruit, I mean cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, avocados, olives, this kind of thing. That's the bulk of my diet. It's basically any kind of properly raised animal and then some low sugar fruit. That's what I eat, I would say 90% of the time.
Okay. Do you ever eat when you're hungry sort of thing, or do you have to follow protocols?
I love intermittent fasting, and I love a 16-8 protocol. So pretty much every day, it's 2 meals in a roughly 8-hour window. And I don't really have to force that. That's honestly just kind of what I slip into and feel the best doing. Occasionally, it'll be longer or shorter, and I do go with how I feel, and I do go with where I'm at. but I definitely try to only eat when I'm hungry. And I find that what I'm eating really automatically pushes me in the direction of this kind of intermittent fasting, this whole lean gains 16-8 thing.
And we've started to notice, now this is not a study of any sort, but just anecdotally, that if you start focusing on high animal-based diet with quite a bit of protein in there, by the way, everybody's got their own definition of quite a bit. So we notice that this pattern seems to occur with other people as well. Hunger levels go down, you feel a high amount of satiety. And is that the case with you and noticing other people around you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, if when you do eat, you go out of your way to eat this sort of super high nutrient density food, you're just not that hungry. I mean, the amount of calories you have to eat goes way down. And I feel like I get some sort of high efficiency where I'm really not eating that many calories. You know, there are plenty of days where I'm eating below 2,000 calories and I'm not restricting and I'm not cutting. I'm not hungry and I'm quite active. And it's just, I just feel like if you really dial the diet in, the amount you have to eat is as low as it can get.
Yes, and you have plenty of free time, which I really enjoy. So during your journey from moving from a high carb to a low carb diet and your experience, were there any books that helped you, or are there any recommendations that you have for people?
Well, okay, definitely the Atkins book. Like the old-fashioned Atkins book was really what got me into all of this. And then shortly thereafter, Protein Power by Mike Eads, Dr. Mike Eads came out, and that was fantastic for me. And I've probably sold more copies of Protein Power than any other human on earth, short of the Eads themselves, I'm quite sure. So that was back in the day, you know, those were my Bibles. And of course, you know, since then I've really appreciated anything by Gary Taubes. I love Nina Teicholz's book, The Big Fat Surprise. I recommend that a lot. Good Calories, Bad Calories. These are probably some of my favorites.
Okay, so I think of you as a good human being. Now, this sounds cliche, but I'm just saying it as a really strong compliment. And the people that I bring on this podcast, I'm a little picky, and you're one of the top people that I wanted to be on the show. So I'm curious that what drives you to do good? Like, what's that Ted Naiman fire inside where he is going out there and helping other people and posting on Twitter and giving information?
Wow. Okay. So like all day long, I see this unending string of people that just show up in front of me. And I see this crazy spectrum of health from like just the most chiseled from granite, fire breathing, CrossFitting specimen of health. They're like glowing, to some decrepit, wheelchair bound, kyphotic, osteoporotic, just wretch of a human. You know, I see this whole spectrum, and I've realized, you know, the only difference between these two people is diet and exercise, like, period. I mean, I guess occasionally you could throw smoking or something like that in there, but it really comes down to those two things. And if you can dial those in, it only takes a microscopic amount of knowledge and time and energy to actually get those right. And you can save people just untold amounts of suffering and add a ton of, you know, quality and lifespan to people if they just have a little bit of this information. And so I'm just really driven to make sure that I really want to democratize this whole diet and exercise thing so that everybody knows how easy it is to be in optimum health with just a couple rules on diet and exercise. And that's what I'm really after. It's, you know, I genuinely want to help people. I haven't, you know, monetized any of this except for the fact that I am just a primary care doctor. But even there, I honestly get paid more if I just prescribe drugs than telling this sort of thing to people.
And I think, coming from an entrepreneurial perspective, I will be honest. Like for me, there's a large component of money involved to pay your employees and make sure that they're healthy, their families are healthy. And when I see people like yourself, I want to encourage an environment of sort of like a master apprentice sort of thing, where people are an apprentice to, let's say, Dr. Ted Naiman, and they say, "Thank you, doctor. You made my life so much different." And now, considering that recently there was this, Sarah Hallberg mentioned in Low Carb Rec, there was a meme going on that $1 in every $4 in Medicare goes towards diabetes control. And so, can't we take just a tiny bit of that and pay it to some of the good people that are doing this for practically free? So that's my only little bit of childish gripe with all of this. So, and I want that to change. I encourage people to reach out to you and say, "Hey, doctor, what can I do for you?"
Well, thank you. I hear what you're saying. I appreciate that. I don't know if it's realistic, because I think people, what I found out is nobody wants to pay any money for health. You know what I'm saying? Because health is just something you're supposed to have for free. So a lot of people have not been able to monetize this information, and probably won't be able to monetize it. And so luckily I have a day job where I just punch a clock and see patients, and for a nonprofit hospital, I might add, and I really like that. And so I'm perfectly happy, and it does give me plenty of free time to just share this information. You know what I mean?
Well, just watch out. We might reach out to you. We might try to steal you from Earth to our keto geek world. Just saying.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, what about a vegetarian and vegan diet? Is that a long-term sustainable option for people?
Well, okay, you can do it right. I have a few vegan patients who are like totally pulling it off, but these people are supplementing the hell out of that crap. Like, I have patients who are, they're basically doing bodybuilding, and they're doing a ton of supplements. They're, every day they're consuming a couple 100 grams of, any kind of high quality, well, quote unquote, high quality plant protein they can get a hold of, whether it's soy protein, pea protein, rice protein, hemp protein. They're consuming protein powders. They're literally taking numerous supplements, mostly, iron, B12, vitamin D. They're taking fish oil. They're taking about a half a dozen crucial supplements, including fish oil, vitamin D, iron, and B12. And they're using protein supplements as well. And then they're still avoiding most widely available carbohydrates, like, grains and sugars. And they're going out of their way to eat green vegetables and foods like this, and they're totally pulling it off. They're in perfect health. Like, I can't find anything wrong with them. So I will be the first one to say that you can be in perfect health on a vegan diet, but you have to go way out of your way to supplement and really do it right. And you have to be really smart, and it's a ton of hard work. And then you've got most of my vegetarian and vegan patients. So sadly, I have a ton of patients who are vegan, and their health is a shambles. And it's really sad, but I have a lot of patients from India, and they are strictly vegetarian or even vegan for religious purposes. And their diet is mostly rice and flour. And so they're eating a ton of naan and rice with every meal, and they're not supplementing. And these people, it makes me want to cry. They come in and their labs are just a nightmare. They have protein malnourishment and DHA deficiency, and they're all pre-diabetic, and they all have metabolic syndrome, and it's nothing but high triglycerides, low HDL, not enough protein, not enough essential fats, pre-diabetes, metabolic syndrome like crazy. They can't get very fat, but they've completely maxed out whatever abdominal fat they can store. it's just it's a disaster. It's a nightmare. So most of my vegans and vegetarians are not doing it right, and their health is a shambles.
Yeah, and I have some roots in a country next door, such as Pakistan. I was raised there for some time, and I can totally relate to this entire narrative that you're mentioning, where the diseases that are very prevalent in the United States and sort of really on the edge are moving towards that area strongly as well. So the whole world is getting enveloped in all of this kind of madness. So you're all about minimalist workout as well. And I've seen you try, and I think you can, do a one-arm chin-up or muscle-up. Is that correct?
Yeah, just, after years and years and years of just failing miserably, I finally can sort of almost do a one-arm chin and a muscle-up. These two moves that are, really... difficult for me. There's some people that make it look easy, but yeah, I just want everyone to know that this takes forever. You will spend years just trying to get a pull up. You will spend years trying to get to 10 pull ups. You'll spend years trying to get half of a one arm chin. Years and years and years and years and years. And so the secret is just to keep trying and be consistent and never give up and just do it over and over and over again.
We had a podcast with Lawrence Neal, and I think you've been on his show as well. And he talks about working out 15 minutes per week. So is that something that you do? Something similar?
Okay. I love Lawrence Neal. I love his podcast. Lawrence Neal is a huge advocate for high intensity training where you have very brief workouts, but the intensity is absolute maximum. And if you're doing that, you probably don't have to work out more than twice a week. I'm doing it more frequently. So I do this, maybe 15-minute workout. Sure. Just what Lawrence Neal is talking about. I aim for daily, and then that makes sure that I get it in at least every other day. And so I think most people, when they're starting out, twice a week is probably good enough. As you get more advanced, 3 times a week is probably better. I don't know that anyone has to do it more than every other day. But yeah, brief workouts is with the maximum intensity is my favorite, just like what Lawrence Neal is preaching.
Yeah, you guys are powerful people. I have the Rocky Balboa syndrome based on Lawrence Neal's analogy, which is go out to the gym, spend an hour there every single day, and make literally no progress. So go ahead.
That's cool. I mean, I know what that's like too. Believe me.
Yeah. So is that kind of counterproductive though, to work out that much?
Yeah, and the sad part is working hard doesn't guarantee that you'll get anywhere. Like, I have so many patients who they're doing CrossFit and they're really working hard. Like, they're sweating and huffing and puffing the whole hour, but they're just not really gaining any muscle, or they're not really feel like they're not really getting anywhere, and I honestly do feel it's because they need a higher level of intensity and focus in one particular exercise, even if it's a much shorter period of time, and then they could see progress. You know what I mean? But if you're just like kind of flailing around, you could work really hard. Like, you could lightly jog for an hour a day for the rest of your life, and you'll probably never look any better or feel any better. And you're working hard, you're sweating, you're putting in work, but it's just not the exact laser focus and intensity that you really need to make it efficient and progressive. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So having a lot of muscles, does that have a protective effect as we age?
Absolutely. So muscle is the organ of longevity, and the stronger you are, the longer you're going to live, and the more muscle you have, the better. Honestly, after researching adipocytes and insulin resistance, and after researching muscular strength and longevity, I feel like your whole goal in life is to get the highest lean mass you can with the lowest fat mass you can. I really think that's kind of the direction most people want to go.
Okay, so this is a dumb statement. Maybe it's not, but it seems like when people are starting to wither away in life, muscle seems to be the first few things that go away. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So muscle is just purely a use it or lose it proposition. If you've ever, seen somebody who had their arm in a cast for 6 weeks, we do this all every day at work. We'll put somebody in a cast and they just can't move their arm for even a few weeks. And when they take it off, that arm is half the circumference of the other side, literally. I mean, it's crazy how fast you lose muscle. I'll put somebody in the ICU for 2 weeks, and after being in bed that long, they need physical therapy to learn how to walk up one flight of stairs. Like you just lose muscle so fast. It's crazy. It's so depressing, but it's true.
So what are some signs of protein malnourishment?
Well, from a blood test point of view, we see low urea nitrogen. But what I see in people who aren't getting enough protein is you'll see a slowing of the growth of your hair and your nails. You'll see wounds taking longer to heal. You'll see some more dental issues. You'll see loss of bone density, loss of muscle density. And all of these are kind of gradual. So it's not like a big red light on your forehead. And I think that's why so many people have it. Because if you had a red light on your forehead that came on from not enough protein, it would be easy. You'd see the light, you'd eat more protein. But all these things that happen are so gradual and so subtle that nobody really notices them.
Well, I went out on a small coffee sort of thing with a vegan chick once, and she said I had some extremely thin hair that seems to come out, and all I was thinking was, is that what Dr. Ted Naiman would think about right here? Protein deficiency?
Probably.
So while I was with this hot chick, I was thinking of Ted Naiman. How crazy is that? So
a little weird.
All good. So what about some of the biomarkers or physical markers, now that we're on it, should we keep track of?
So, okay, I've done a lot of functional medicine training, and I used to order all these crazy blood tests, like ridiculously over the top. And now I've realized that about 99% of that is just complete bullshit and totally worthless. And I realized that it almost never changed my advice to anyone. And so I've gotten almost as minimalistic with my evaluations as I have with my diet and exercise crap. And now it's like, okay, a waist circumference is extremely valuable. And then just some very basic blood tests like A1C, triglycerides, HDL. I'll usually do a complete blood count and a comprehensive metabolic panel just to see where people are at there. But my lab testing has shriveled way down. It's like the more I know, the less labs I order. I think I had this sort of Dunning-Kruger spike of lab ordering back in the day, when I was all excited about functional medicine. I would order a bunch of stuff. And I realize now it's because I didn't know what the hell I was doing or what to do with all of this stuff. And now I realize most of it's non-value added and not actionable. And you really just go back to basic principles, and then you don't need so many labs. I've come full circle.
Yeah, I think as a food company, we're starting to realize the same thing, is that the simplest solutions are the most effective solutions. And I think you're the person who proposes the simple steak and eggs is basically the solution to a lot of the biggest problems on earth. So, By the way, we took that from you. Just want to let you know. If you want commissions, just let us know.
No, that's fine. It's yours for the taking.
Okay, so there's a lot of different kinds of ketos and low carbs around there. And if I'm a newbie, what can I do? Where do I begin?
Wow. Okay. So like, I still like some of these books for people to read, like Protein Power and Dr. Atkins. These are pretty good. A huge shout out to Diet Doctor. I do send a lot of patients there. This website is so slick now. Thank you, Dr. Einfeld, because this has been a very, very good resource. I send a lot of people to Diet Doctor. But yeah, the bottom line is you got to eat less carbs. Everybody on earth is eating too much carbohydrate, but you can't just not eat carbs. If I tell you, okay, you can't eat carbs today, well, you're going to be starving. 10 minutes later, you're going to eat a whole box of donuts. So what you really have to do is go out of your way to eat steak and eggs, and then you're not hungry, and then you cannot eat carbs, and then you're pretty much done. And it's really, really that basic. And that's what I'm telling people. I'm like, eat enough steak and eggs that you're not hungry, and then try to not eat as many refined carbohydrates. And it sounds stupid, but that's just really as basic as it has to be.
And like you said, we are also noticing the same anecdotes with steak and eggs. It's really difficult to overconsume steak and eggs. It's practically seems impossible to do that. So more power to this.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, but this question still remains, like, how much fat should we be taking in? Because we've had the guys from Keto Gains show up where there's this high fat, ultra high fat, and then you have the group which says protein is important. I personally, to be honest, I follow the protein sort of thing, and the protein leverage hypothesis. By the way, is that legit?
Yeah, I am so infatuated with the protein leverage hypothesis right now. I keep trying to come up with some black swans to disprove it, and that's a little bit hard to do at the moment. So I'm really, really liking protein leverage, and everybody knows I'm all in on the protein thing, and okay, I have a little problem with protein restriction, and I'll tell you why. Okay, let's say you're trying to eat as little protein as possible, right? Well, first of all, you still need glucose. You need glucose to run your red blood cells and your retinas and your brain and all that. You're going to use, let's say you're going to use 150 grams of glucose a day, and let's say that you're doing some high intensity exercise in there, and you're going to burn another 150 grams of glucose doing that, because you will use glucose at maximum intensities. So let's say you need a couple hundred grams of glucose a day, but you're trying to eat no carbohydrates. Well, you have to make all of that glucose from gluconeogenesis. If you have tons of adipose tissue and tons of fat, you can 5% of that is the glycerol backbones of triglycerides, so you can perform gluconeogenesis out of that and make some glucose out of just burning fat. But you have to have tons of fat and be burning body fat wide open to do that. And anyone who's even halfway to their weight loss goals is not going to be able to make that much glucose from their adipose. So you're basically going to use protein for gluconeogenesis. Okay, so you need a couple hundred grams of glucose every day. You have to make it all from protein. But let's say you're trying to restrict protein, so you're eating, 70, 80 grams of protein. The average protein intake worldwide is 77 grams per day. So let's say you're eating 77 grams of protein a day, like the average human on Earth, and then you're trying to eat no carbs, and you need 300 grams of gluconeogenesis per day. This is not a good equation. You're literally going to take this protein. People say you can't store protein. Everyone says, well, you can't store protein. Bullshit. You store protein in your muscles and in your bones and in your organs. And the minute you don't have enough free aminos to do gluconeogenesis, you will just immediately start drawing down your stored protein, which is your muscles and your bones and your vital mass, which is your brain and your organs and stuff like that. So I just don't see protein restriction as a good idea. I'm not saying that everyone should eat, 600 grams of protein a day. Although I do have some interesting studies on people who did just that, and they were fine. But I'm saying that protein restriction, when you're also not eating any carbs, is probably not a good idea.
Is there a hierarchy of how glucose is used by the body, as in a state where you're bringing in less from gluconeogenesis? And another question would be, sorry to bring two at the same time, does protein gram for gram translate into glucose, like 1 gram of protein into 1 gram of sugar, glucose?
Oh, well, okay. So first of all, yeah, there are all these compensations people's bodies do automatically on low carb diets, where you're using way less glucose when you're exercising, and you're trying to use fat as much as you can. You're also trying to tap into your glycogen as little as possible. But at the end of the day, if you're doing high intensity exercise and you're eating no carbohydrates, you're going to have to do a fair amount of gluconeogenesis, and that is going to require some absolute amounts of protein. And if you're not eating it, it will be coming from your lean mass. As far as the 1-to-1, well, it's complicated because the protein is of a certain number of carbon atoms, and you deaminate it, strip off the nitrogen group, and you have to deal with carbon skeletons, and you have to break it down, and then you have to build glucose out of that. So you can't really make it like a 1-to-1 comparison exactly.
Okay. But what about the preferential glucose treatment? Does the brain get a higher priority above every other thing in scarcity?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is tooled to keep your brain going. That's basically always priority alpha.
Okay, sounds fantastic. All right, so, wow, we've nailed some interesting topics. Protein-sparing modified fast. We've never talked about it on our podcast. Why not talk to the protein king himself about this?
So protein-sparing modified fast, there's a ton of studies in the medical literature on this. We do it all the time with our bariatric surgery patients. They're basically just eating nothing but protein. And I think it's probably the very, very fastest and safest way to lose weight. I've seen people have crazy success with protein-sparing modified fasts who are morbidly obese, or even people just trying to get thinner in a really rapid fashion, like, bodybuilding contest prep and that sort of thing. And what you're doing is you're cranking up the protein consumption and you're cranking down the energy consumption. You're basically low carb and low fat. It works really well. The protein spares muscle, provides some satiety. You're low carb, so you're generally in ketosis. And then you're just not eating fat, so most of the fat you're burning comes from inside your body. Sounds good on paper, works really well in real life. Very painful, though. Nobody can do this for a long time. This is a very short-term thing only.
Why is it short term? Is it because people can't adhere to it, or is it because they're just going to get starved to death? Which, if someone is obese, that's another criticism, which is pretty lame. Oh, rabbit starvation.
Well, you can actually do a protein, as long as you have plenty of body fat, you can continue to do a protein-sparing modified fast indefinitely. But once you get lean enough, then because the thermic effect of protein is so high, if you eat, more than 50% of your calories as protein, if you're really, really thin, you're just not going to get enough energy.
Okay.
I'm not too worried about it because it's so painful and horrible that at that point anyone's going to eat more energy. So it's not like a actual real world problem.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so there's this trend. We have a mutual friend who's on a carnivore diet. What's up with that? What's going on? Did they just take your advice of steak and eggs and go to like a whole new level?
Right, exactly. So, I love Dr. Baker. The carnivore thing. I love the carnivore thing because it feels like an antidote to veganism. It's like yin and yang. You've got all these plant-based people on one side, and so the universe had to invent Sean Baker and the carnivores just to balance out. So thank God for zero carb and carnivores just to equalize the universe. I love that diet because it's the most brain dead simple way to optimize your protein to energy ratio without even trying or thinking about it or ever doing anything, right? You just eat nothing but animals and you're basically automatically going to be fine. The only problem I have with it is that nobody has to go all plant or all animal. And since, every human on Earth is an omnivore, no matter whether they choose to eat all plants or choose to eat all animals, they are an omnivore. You can't get around that. All humans have eaten both plants and animals. And it's a false dichotomy to say that you have to eat just only plants or just only animals. And so I think a lot of people get confused. Now it's like, okay, what the hell do I actually eat? Because it's either all plants, all animals, and everything in between is just like going to McDonald's. I don't think it has to be that polarized. So that part of it I don't really like. But I do think that's one very simple way to kind of get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Initially, you sounded like Star Wars, the dark side and the light side, the balance.
There you go.
And you also have to remember you created the universe. So just to remind you consistently.
Oh, right. Wow. Okay. Thanks.
So what about veggies and plants? I mean, we get this constant information barrage from the carnivorous world that they're toxic, they're evil, they're bad, they're monstrous. Sometimes even I call plants as dead green monsters. So should I be afraid of them totally?
Well, I mean, if you want to just zoom way out of the whole diet space and just look at the facts, most of the biomass of plants on Earth is highly toxic to humans and should not be eaten. And a lot of the plant foods we eat, you probably only want to eat it after it's been cooked. So, yeah, I would be worried about plants. I mean, again, I'm just going to dump you off in the wilderness with nothing but a spear. And you're going to try that plant over there, the one with the really shiny leaves, and it's not going to end well. You know what I'm saying? Like, we should be a little bit nervous about plants. It's like what happened to the first hunter-gatherer who tried to eat this plant or that plant. It's not, they're not there because they want us to eat them. So honestly, personally, I really do prefer low sugar fruit because I think this is a plant food that quite literally wants to be eaten. And so I feel like it's a little bit friendlier to me, which could be just insane. Like that, I have nothing to back that up. That's not scientific. It's just crazy talk, actually. But I do end up, eating low sugar fruit is probably my main source of plant foods, and I'm talking cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, olives, avocados. I eat a lot of those low sugar fruit. That's my favorite. And I am afraid of some plant foods. I mean, like, if you eat a handful of uncooked red kidney beans, that's probably going to make you very sick or even kill you. If you crush up and chew and swallow dozens of apple seeds, that's that's going to be enough toxin to at least make you really sick. There's a lot of plant foods. If you take the plant doesn't want you to eat the nuts and seeds. You know what I mean? It really wants you to eat the fruit. If you crush up the pit of an avocado, they use it in South America to kill rodents. They mix crushed up avocado pits with cheese or peanut butter, and you've got ready-made, rat and mouse killer. So this is like these things don't want to be eaten. So I'm like mindful of the fact that certain plant foods want to be eaten or aren't as protected and others don't, which I know sounds crazy and probably is crazy, but that's where I'm at personally.
No, it's totally understandable. Can you imagine how many Jimmies and Augs we lost in this battle to domesticate plants? Like the guy who first went and was like, okay, your turn, go try that plant. And
exactly.
15 minutes later, okay, that's a failure.
No doubt. I mean, hopefully somebody was writing all that down because that's the only way we learn.
Exactly. So let's open this can of worm of Warfield in the entire universe of food and nutrition. What does it mean by adequate protein?
Well, okay. Like I said, the average human on Earth eats 77 grams of protein. And I am going to go way out on a limb and say that is too low. And if you look at all the different human groups on Earth, right? You'll see in Nigeria and in Africa and in Japan, they're eating way more carbs and way less fat than we eat here. But then in France and the US, you see way more fat and way less carbs. But what seems to be very, very focused and similar across all these groups is protein is hanging out at around 15%-ish. If you look at America, though, over the past 60 years, we've dumped so much sugar, flour, and oil into the food supply, we've diluted that down to about 12.5%, and obesity just exploded. And then if you look at any population where people have lost weight, if you look at the weight loss registry of people who've successfully lost weight, they're all eating about 19% protein or higher on average. So you can look at groups that are doing worse and worse and their protein percent is lower, and you can look at groups that are doing better and better and their protein percent is higher. And so successful weight loss people are eating literally a higher absolute amount of protein. They're definitely eating north of about 100 grams a day for adults. So personally, I think that we're not eating enough protein. I think that's for a multitude of reasons. Mostly protein's the most expensive, right? If you look at every food in the grocery store and rank it by the amount of protein in it, the higher the protein, the more expensive it is. So there's a huge economic factor there. And then we're subsidizing growing all this crappy free energy like soybean oil and corn and wheat. And so we dump in all these empty calorie carbs and fats. Protein gets diluted more. Protein's the most expensive. You add that all together, people are eating less and less protein. The same thing's happening worldwide. And then if you look at hunter-gatherer groups worldwide, none of them are eating less than 20% protein. Most of them more like 30% or 35%. If you look at, we have studies where they took pre-diabetics, and the only thing they told them to do is to increase their protein intake. So it was about 30% of calories. And you can pretty much reverse any pre-diabetic on Earth by getting their protein percent up to 30. And does that mean we should be eating more absolute protein? Yeah. The only way to eat less carbs and fats is to get protein satiety first. So I think we should all be eating more protein. Now, I don't think anybody has to be eating, hundreds of grams of protein. Probably, I would say most adults should be eating at least 120 grams, please. And you might want to eat more if you're wasting more protein. Diabetics actually tend to chew through way more protein for gluconeogenesis, and they actually have higher protein requirements than the rest of us. And so in those settings, you might even want to eat more protein. I really like a gram per pound of reference weight or desired weight, or how much. I like people to eat 1 gram per pound of what they're supposed to weigh.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had some people on Instagram text or direct message us and said, "Oh, protein's way too high. I'm not going to eat a steak." So what about high amounts of fat? Is there something called fat toxicity, or can we make that up right now?
You can't. I don't know that you can eat too much fat if you're exercising like crazy. Like, I've seen these studies of ketogenic cyclists where they're eating, 300 grams of fat, and it doesn't seem to be a problem, and they're ripping right through all of it just with huge volumes of exercise. So I don't know in that setting, but I'll tell you this: if you're sedentary and you're insulin resistant, oh hell yes, you can eat too much fat. Absolutely. In fact, okay, I don't know that I think a lot of keto people don't know this, but you can gain a crap ton of weight on a strictly ketogenic diet. I swear to God, I have patients who come in and they have strict ketogenic diets with less than 30 grams of carbs a day. And I'm talking, they've got Precision Extra ketone readings daily. They've got a food log. They are tracking every single thing. They're in strict ketosis. I've watched a patient gain 50 or 60 pounds on a strict ketogenic diet with less than 30 grams of carbs a day and ketone measurements to prove it. And everybody in the keto sphere thinks that if you can just get your carbs low enough, that's all you have to do. You'll automatically eat less and you'll be fine. That's not exactly true. If you get your carbs low enough, it's a lot easier to eat less and lose weight. But that's a little bit uncomfortable. You have to tap into hunger just a little bit. You have to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit so you're drawing down your fat stores. For some people, it's so uncomfortable to feel their fat stores going down at all that they just eat fat to satiety. And if the amount of fat you're eating every day equals the amount of fat you're burning every day, you're not going to lose at all. And if you're eating even a little bit more than that, it's basic fat balance. You will gain fat. Like, there's no way around it. So you can literally gain fat on a strict ketogenic diet. And I watched it happen numerous times. And that'll especially happen to someone who doesn't like to be uncomfortable at all. They never want to be even slightly hungry. So the minute they feel like they're not totally full, they eat more fat, and they're eating fat to quote unquote satiety. You know what I mean? These are usually my patients who don't want to push outside of their comfort bubble at all. They're not doing high intensity exercise because they feel uncomfortable. They're not doing intermittent fasting because that's uncomfortable. They're not eating less than they're expending because that feeling of drawing down your stored body fat is uncomfortable. And so if you really don't ever want to be uncomfortable, you can gain weight on a ketogenic diet for sure.
Yep, and when I started the keto diet, and some of the people in our community, now this is just the reality of it, there are two sort of camps that are going on. I don't know about the other camp, but there's that, oh, eat as much fat and you'll be fine and everything will be blah, blah, blah. But people like yourself, and noticing some of the anecdotes from people like Keto Gain, some of the other communities, some of our mutual friends like Marty Kendall, I started noticing that that's not true. People are actually gaining weight on a ketogenic diet. So we changed, and it's all thanks to you guys.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, I mean, I had to change too. I mean, so honestly, I was, I've been low carb for so long, and I'm just like this basic low carb. Eat less carbs, make some glucose the hard way out of protein and gluconeogenesis. Don't eat all your glucose. And then this keto thing came along, And it was like, ooh, maybe you shouldn't eat too much protein and you should just eat a lot of fat. And I totally jumped on board with that. And I'm just as guilty as everybody else. I mean, I used to say, oh, well, you don't want to eat too much protein because then you're just going to turn that into glucose. I've literally said those words before. When I really didn't know. It's, you just don't, there's not like a great textbook for this stuff. So, but I think what really scared me the most is my diabetics, right? So if you have diabetes and you're checking your blood sugar every morning and you go on a strict ketogenic diet, but you're eating just as much fat as you're burning, your morning blood sugars will not go down at all. And your A1C will not go down at all. And your weight will not go down at all, even if you eat no carbs whatsoever. And what ends up happening is that if you're keeping your fat cells overfilled, there's this the fat is constantly trying to come back out of your adipocytes, and you have all these free fatty acids in your bloodstream. And just all this energy substrate hitting your liver drives glucose production. And your insulin's always high, your glucose is always high. And I've had people's A1C go up on strict ketogenic diets. And that's where I was like, what the hell? This is like really dangerously bad, right? If you're an uncontrolled diabetic, I mean, I've had diabetics come in and their A1C is through the roof, and a ketogenic diet, actually their A1C went up, even though they're eating no carbohydrates. And everyone's like, well, how is that possible? Or you're not eating. Well, it's because you have so much energy in your bloodstream at all times. You're just driving gluconeogenesis, and your insulin is constantly high. And these people, it's almost an emergency that they have to instantly be low carb and low fat at the same time, because they literally have too much fat in their body and too much fat in their adipocytes and too much fat in their blood. And that's what's driving their high blood sugars in the morning. I mean, try it out. If you're an uncontrolled diabetic and you eat a couple 100 grams of fat, your blood sugar won't go up at all. But you look at your blood sugar the next day, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Your blood sugar will literally go up the next morning. This is because you have too much fat in your body. So some of these crazy nutbag vegans who are like, well, fat is really the cause of, you hear Mango Man saying, well, the real cause of diabetes is fat, so you shouldn't eat any fat. I hate to say it, but these crazy nutbag vegans are actually slightly right. They have a point there. What's really driving insulin resistance and diabetes is too much fat in your cells. Of course, they don't talk about the fact that the reason you got too much fat in there is because you were eating carbs all the time that displaced all your fat oxidation, and the fat just built up. They leave that part out. But these people literally want to be low carb and low fat at the same time. And the only way to do that without starving and losing half your weight as lean mass is to eat pretty much nothing but protein, which brings us back to the protein-sparing modified fast kind of concept, which really just looks like eating leaner meat and not putting a bunch of butter and heavy cream on everything.
Yep, and that answers the question to some of the people who were messaging us and saying, okay, I'm on a low carb or a ketogenic diet, but my A1C or any of those markers are not improving at all, and now you've just cracked the code. So everybody who's listening, I think it might be time to drop that bulletproof coffee every morning, along with other things that you're just focusing on, which are empty sources of fat. And this might even go as a strong point to some of the other people that are in the keto community, and it might be time to change a few things here and there. So, Thank you, good God of nutrition. So, let's start wrapping things up. What is nutritional bioavailability, and is there like a role of the gut microbiome on it?
Oh wow! So I'm not a big microbiome expert, and I've kind of been ignoring the microbiome because I feel like it's the cart and not the horse, you know what I mean? And my patients who try to drive their health via their colon aren't really getting anywhere. So I'm pretty much ignoring the microbiome. And I think that it's not, I don't know if the microbiome plays a huge role. I mean, you look at these germ-free mice who are born in a sterile environment and fed irradiated food and have zero microbiome, and they're doing okay. So I'm not convinced that the secret to everything is in your microbiome. And then bioavailability is just basically how much of the actual macro micronutrients from your food are available for you to absorb via your intestine. And of course, that's kind of where I think animal food probably has an edge over plant food. And there's a reason why my vegans have iron deficiency, etc.
Awesome. What kind of research would you like to see, or areas of study that fascinate you?
Wow. I want to see more research on protein leverage. Like, I really, really, really want to see, and I want to see protein leverage in a low carb light as well. You know what I mean? Like, you have all these bros out there who say that, well, as long as protein's high enough, carbs versus fat doesn't matter. And I'm not convinced that's true. I think that if protein is high enough, that will probably get you halfway where you want to be, but I still think there's a carb versus fat difference as well. And people clearly eat the lowest on ad lib diets with high protein and low carb. And so I just want to see more studies around macronutrients with a higher protein and a lower carb versus, let's say, higher protein and higher fat, instead. We have a few studies out there, but not very many, and I'd like to see some more.
But they use one thing, though, which I'm also confounded by: potato.
Right.
Do you have anything to say to the potato?
Oh, wait, okay, actually, so potato, if you're eating, a small boiled potato, this is really not a super high carb food to begin with. If you look at the nutritional density, it's really not that terrible. If you look at how much water is in there, and it's really not like the worst thing ever. It's nowhere near as bad as an acellular carb like sugar and flour. So potatoes aren't that awful. And I do think that small tubers are probably part of the original human diet. So if someone's eating a small, like a non-cultivated potato is probably a perfectly acceptable human food. It's going to be, the size of a golf ball, and you're going to have to do a lot of digging to get any, amount of them. And it's not going to have any fat with it like a French fry or a potato chip. But then once you cultivate a potato to be the size of your head and have this massive starch yield, and then you add a bunch of fat from like French fries or potato chips, now you've got the number one vegetable in America and the single food that's most linked to obesity, which I think is potato chips. And now it's just a big disaster. So there's a big difference between somebody eating a couple tiny boiled, cooked and cooled, tiny little tubers versus, the Idaho baker the size of your head that you've deep fried.
Still reminds me of that Jimmy and Og story that we discussed some time ago. Can you imagine the first guy who was pulling out the tuber and it's like, okay, I could technically eat that. I don't know what he was thinking. So
yeah, you have to be pretty damn hungry.
All right. So let's say right away, just to get through this quickly, if my doctor says I have type 2 diabetes, what should I do? Should I go to Dr. Ted Naiman? Can people come to you, by the way? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have diabetics seeing me every single day, and we have a ton of patients who have literally, quote unquote, cured their diabetes. And you absolutely can completely cure type 2 diabetes. This, if we get you off your meds and we get your A1C down to 5.6 or lower, and you leave it there for a year,
So if you have had a 5.6 or lower for a year off no meds, we literally cross diabetes off of your chart and declare you cured. And contrary to popular belief, if these people are genuinely thin and healthy and active, if they've added in exercise, if they got their waist circumference low enough, they can actually even eat carbohydrate and tolerate this enough to pass a glucose tolerance test. So you literally are cured. You can literally reverse diabetes. It will involve weight loss. It will involve reducing your waist circumference, and it will involve some exercise in it to improve lean mass and muscle. But if you nail all those things, you can absolutely cure your type 2 diabetes, and we're seeing it happen all the time.
Sounds good. Any topic you think we should discuss here before we finish everything up?
Wow. Well, I think, I'm just like the average person who comes to see me who's not successful. They haven't lost weight. They haven't reversed their diabetes. The two things that they're doing that I think need to be corrected 99% of the time. Number one, exercise. I see so many people who they don't have a formal exercise program. And if they did anything for even 5 minutes a day, it would be huge. So exercise is one. And the other is protein to energy ratio. You've got to get that protein up and the energy down. And for most people trying to lose weight or reverse diabetes, protein should probably, by grams, be your dominant macronutrient. You know what I'm saying? Like your protein grams should be higher than your fat grams, and definitely your carbohydrate grams for most people who are trying to reverse something.
So what are some of the myths that people have against this protocol, saying that, oh, it's too much protein, it's going to kill me?
Well, everyone thinks that protein is going to cause kidney damage, which is a giant load of crap. Like, there are tons of studies on protein and kidney damage, and nobody with normal functioning kidneys has ever had protein cause kidney damage. And believe me, if this were a thing, then the bodybuilding community would be giving us medical case studies like crazy. If excessive protein really did hurt your kidneys, we would have so many medical case reports from the bodybuilding community. And instead, we have exactly zero ever at all, period, none. So like it does not damage your kidneys. Everyone's worried about protein and bone health. Well, it's actually the opposite. Low protein diets cause osteoporosis, and the more protein you eat, the better your bone density. So lean mass, muscle, bone density all go up with higher protein. It doesn't damage your kidneys or your liver. Gluconeogenesis is demand driven, not supply driven. So you're really not going to be in trouble there. I have studies on cyclists who ate 500-600 grams of protein a day, making it 80% of their calories, just these huge quantities. And they were still in ketosis just because they were restricting carbs and exercising like crazy. And so there's almost no such thing as, quote, too much protein, close quote. Never once in my medical career have I ever looked at a patient and said, you're eating, quote, too much protein. Even in patients with kidney failure, if you look at kidney disease and you look at all the studies on protein restriction and kidney disease, only 7% of all chronic kidney disease will benefit from protein restriction. That's people with primary glomerular disease. And that's only 7% of all chronic kidney disease, right? So you've got this tiny subset of kidney disease that benefits from protein restriction, glomerular disease. And in that subset, only men actually benefited, not women. This is starting to sound like statins, right? So you've got half of 7%. And even then, the benefit was single-digit percent compared to a normal protein diet. So you've got like maybe 1% of anyone with chronic kidney disease who will even show any tiny marginal benefit from protein restriction. So like the whole concept that protein is bad is just completely deranged. There's no evidence to support it. We have tons and tons of evidence that it's safe and harmless thanks to bodybuilders. So I don't know where it came from, but it's a giant load of crap.
Yeah. I'm waiting till when I die from this much steak that I'm eating per day. So we'll see. Like your quote, me and Corey, the other guy who's with me, we always take your tweets and use them as our quotes all the time. So we tell each other, hey, I'm just waiting for that insulin resistance to pop in after this steak. So
awesome.
Thank you for all those amazing quotes.
Oh, man, I'm going to try to keep going. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So you got a final message. And if you do or don't, we would also like some plugs on how people can find you.
Yeah, I mean, my big message is I just want people to start exercising, because that's the one thing I see as the missing piece in the diet space. You know what I mean? Like, I have so many people who are nailing low carb, but they just don't exercise and they're not getting the results they want. So I'm not trying to make it all about calories or anything, but I want people to be in optimum health. I want people to be in perfect health, and that's going to involve some sort of high intensity exercise. So please go listen to Lawrence Neal's high intensity podcast. You really don't have to spend hardly any time or money on it. I mean, you can just do body weight, but if you get the intensity high enough, you're going to radically improve your health.
And to call it to the end, I'll say I would really love it if my doctor was jacked as fuck. Just want to lay that out there. So it's good to have you to lead the charge in that domain. So I would really feel confident about that doctor. Just saying. So how can people?
Thanks.
So did we do the final plugs on people how they can find you?
Oh, well, there's my crazy little website at Burn Fat Not Sugar. And then I'm on Twitter, and there's a Burn Fat Not Sugar Facebook page, and I'm pretty available on any of those.
Okay, and if I was a new client looking to reverse diabetes or any chronic conditions that you specialize in, your website would be the best place to go, correct?
Yeah, that would probably be a good place to go. Absolutely.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was the great one, the chosen one that we call Dr. Ted Naiman. And thank you so much, Doc. You have been an inspiration, to say the very least.
Oh, no, thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the show. You can visit us at ketogeek.com to check out our premium keto-friendly and low-carb food products, including our infamous energy pods, made from the best ingredients we could find in the entire country. We also recommend signing up for our newsletter at ketogeek.com/signup, where you get exclusive discounts, rewards, product announcements, and the latest content we are working on. You also get a 10% discount on your entire order when you sign up. Go to ketogeek.com/signup to join the low carb playground.